I am so excited to be here with y'all and talk about crisis pregnancy centers, or as we at GER call them, anti-abortion centers. But first, I will introduce myself. I am zooming in today from my home in Portland, Maine, um, and I am currently the interim executive director of GER. We are looking for a new executive director. I'm very excited about that. My original role in GER is the National Grassroots Organizer, and I'm really excited to go back to that role full time when we find a new leader. And here with me tonight, I just wanted to have one of our GER activists who is really out there on a weekly basis confronting anti-abortion centers. Bonnie Salmons, just say a hello and maybe share a little bit about what it's like for you taking these on, and then we'll dive into our presentation.
Thanks, Kate. I you said just say a little bit. You don't want to get me going, right? You you've heard me express my feelings about how I felt when this law was passed. I don't even remember how long ago now, but I will just say briefly that getting involved with GER has helped me channel all of the absolute rage that I had about this. And we are out there weekly, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder with people who are working for the same outcomes, something that's fair and realistic, and something that the majority of people want. I don't need to say this to all of you, but I just want to say how wonderful GER is for people who want to do something about this and not just be angry about it. So thanks. I'm going to listen in tonight, and thanks everybody for being there. It's very encouraging to see so many people interested in this work.
We are an organization that centers the power and leadership and voices and wisdom of older women and works intergenerationally with young people, focused on reproductive health rights and justice issues. We were started in Maine. We're an emerging national organization. We work with folks in many states across the country, and we work a lot through partnerships as well with different organizations. One of our major efforts is to expose, educate and folks about anti-abortion centers and confront them in our local communities. We have a lot in common with Trouble Nation and Red, Wine, and Blue in the sense that we provide tools and resources for people to organize where they are, the communities they know best, right? And so that's one of the things we do. So tonight we're gonna learn. This is a quick and dirty. What are anti-abortion centers? Why are they harmful? Why is it so important that we take them on? And so I am going to share some slides and we'll get right into it. Okay, so this is just a photo of one of the sort of protests outside of a local anti-abortion center in Augusta, Maine. But let's start with what is an anti-abortion center. So you may have heard these called crisis pregnancy centers. They also go by pregnancy care center, women's center, pregnancy resource center. They have many names, but they really have one goal, which is they want to stop people from fulfilling decisions to have abortions or making the decision to have an abortion. These centers, there are over 2,500 of them. It's hard to track them exactly, but there are between 25 and 4,000 of these centers across the country. Before the Dobbs decision in 2022 that overturned Roe v. Wade, these centers on a national level outnumbered real sexual and reproductive health care clinics 3-1. I suspect it's much worse, and we're getting new data all the time. In some states, it's as bad as 9-1. Or in a place like Texas today, there are almost 200 of these centers, and there are no operating abortion clinics, right? So it's a pretty dire situation. These are centers whose entire agenda is to prevent abortions, and they will lie and deceive people and coerce people in order to advance that agenda. There are many ways that they jeopardize the health and well-being of pregnant people and their families, and we believe at GER that they warrant a strong public health response. So one thing I want to introduce folks to, and I have like a resource document that I'm happy to share with Red, Wine, and Blue to share out with folks who registered for this afterwards. But one of the really important tools, um, if you have wondered how to find an anti-abortion center near you, there's this wonderful directory. There are several really good directories. This is the one that I have found to be the most comprehensive. It's called the Crisis Pregnancy Center Map. And when you go on to this, you can put in your state and it will pop up all of the different identified crisis pregnancy centers near you. And so this is a tool that I encourage people to use, and I'll share out a document that has this tool, but it's a really easy way to find out how many of those are around me, even just in an hour or 2 hour radius. So a really important thing to know about anti-abortion centers. These are places that can often look like mom and pop operations. There's a real range of what they look like. Some of them are little storefronts. They are often set up very near or directly across from, or even in the same plaza as real abortion clinics. And that's intentional. They often have names that sound, there's one here in Maine called the Resolve Life Center. Um, there, there's one called Open Arms, right? So there are lots of different names that sound kind of warm and welcoming. And often these places, when they are set up next to an actual abortion clinic, they will adopt a name so close to the name of that clinic that it confuses people who are seeking abortion care there. But despite the range of how these places look, how professional or not, whether they look very faith-based, very religious, or very medicalized, what's important to know is that there are 4 large organizations that connect all of these thousands of anti-abortion centers across the country. So even if from first glance it looks like a small local mom and pop operation of just some good church folk trying to help their community, in fact, most of these centers are affiliated with international organizations. One is Birthright International, Heartbeat International, and CareNet. And so, when I think about what these places are, I think about McDonald's, right? And so, um, the CareNet is kind of the McDonald's of anti-abortion centers. So is Heartbeat International and Birthright. They're little franchises, right? So there are franchises, there are affiliates across the country, but they get their money and their rhetoric and their operational playbook from these much larger, very well-funded organizations that are controlled by very conservative people who are pushing policy agendas through Congress and state legislatures. So it's all very connected. The other organization here to be aware of is the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, or Nifla. And that may sound familiar, that acronym, because there was a Supreme Court case, Nifla v. Becerra, um, that was decided in favor of Nifla when some folks in California tried to enforce laws that would require these centers to clearly state what they do and do not provide to people in a very straightforward manner. And that case, they sued, and that case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they are using the First Amendment to say that any attempts to get them to speak very straightforwardly and truthfully about their work is an infringement on their free speech rights. So we like to let people know that this is who's behind the curtain, no matter who you're interacting with at a little operation in your town. This is who is behind that. And these are folks who are connected to the Charlotte Lozier Institute. They're connected to major major far right political organizations and policy institutes and things like that. So anti-abortion centers have a few strategies and tactics. They do things slightly differently depending on who and what they are, but their game plan is pretty much this. They advertise, spend big money on search engine optimization or CEO, right? Which SEO, which is a way to when I type in I need an abortion, help, or how do I find an abortion? And I'm a scared teenager or young adult, and I'm kind of panicking because I just used a drugstore pregnancy test and it came back positive. Um, they pay a lot of money so that the first thing that comes up in Google are their centers. So someone who is looking for an abortion is very often rerouted through their Google search to one of these centers. So that is one way that they seek to divert people away from abortions. And they have a lot of money to spend. And clinics are usually hanging on by the skin of their teeth, right? And so, despite all of the talk about the abortion industry and all of the money that people think is made, most clinics are in the red providing abortion care and usually work to provide it even if someone cannot fully pay for it. Um, so that big money goes there, so people are getting the wrong information from the moment that they type something into Google. Another, sort of tactic of theirs I've already talked about is mimicking actual clinics. And they do that by the names they call themselves, where they set up shop. There are many, many stories because we work closely with the Abortion Care Network, which is a national network of independent abortion care providers across the country. We're in touch with a lot of clinics. And so many of them have experiences of sharing a parking lot with an anti-abortion center that's set up next to them, and that there are people out there who are literally going into the parking lot and telling vulnerable young people, "Oh, yep, this is the right way to your appointment." And those folks think they're going to the appointment they made with a real clinic, and in fact are walking into an anti-abortion center. One of the ways that they get folks in the door is that they often advertise free services like free ultrasounds, free pregnancy tests, sometimes free STI testing. Um, we know how expensive healthcare is. Um, and certainly, abortion clinics wish that there were no financial barriers to the services they provide, and family planning clinics as well. A Planned Parenthood provides that full range of services, and many indie clinics also provide a lot of services, but abortion is the potentially the most time sensitive service that they provide, certainly. So healthcare costs a lot of money and they cannot offer things for free. And so I would say, if you ever see someone uh, offering medical services for free and they're not associated with an entity that's very well vetted, it is likely that you're going to pay for that service in other ways. So we'll talk more about ultrasounds in a minute because it's a really important piece of what they do, but they are luring in people who are um, who are trying to get answers. They're trying to find out if they're pregnant or confirm a pregnancy. Um, and they're in a moment of vulnerability. And this is where they can find access. But when they go in there, many people who end up in anti-abortion centers believe that they are entering a licensed, regulated medical facility, and they usually are not. Um, so we will talk more about this, but that is how they lure folks in. This these places really target communities of young people. The anti-abortion center that is in my town, an entire section of their website is dedicated to providing very detailed directions, driving and bus directions from each high school in the city to their center. They're trying to get young people who are maybe frightened. They target communities of color, they target low income communities. Um, One of the tactics that these places use that's really horrific, we call it running out the clock. Basically, they love to waste folks' time. So, um, they will often, you will notice if you're on any of their websites, they're really trying to get people to make appointments and come in person. And one of the things that they do is try to convince people that there is time to sit and wait on their decision. Now, we know, particularly in a post-obs world, that there are many more states that have gestational limit bans, right? And that if there is any possibility of someone getting an abortion in their state and it's a restricted state, the gestational age of their pregnancy really matters. So dated ultrasounds really matter. Um, the the thing that these centers do is that they will give an ultrasound, and there are many roads here. One is they perform an ultrasound and it's really never totally clear if that is actually an ultrasound printout of your pregnancy if you were to go in there. Because these places are not licensed and regulated, there is truly no way to know if that is real information. There are many instances that have been reported. Um, of people going in, getting an ultrasound. There's one example after SB 8 passed in Texas of a young person who ended up at one of these places, got a free ultrasound. They told her she was 10 weeks pregnant. She went to a real clinic later. She was 20 weeks pregnant a week later. That is an enormous difference. Those pregnancies look very different. Um, and so that's the kind of situation that people can be put in. One of the other really common things these centers will say on their website and in people's, in person with people who come in is a quarter of pregnancies will end in miscarriage anyway. So you should maybe wait a few weeks and maybe you'll just miscarry on your own. That is not only terrible advice for someone who's looking for answers in a time sensitive situation. It's also really nonchalant about pregnancy loss, which can be obviously a very intense experience for someone. So these are the kinds of things they do to delay people having the information they need to make the decision that's best for them. Uh, Anti-abortion centers also are on the front lines of spreading abortion disinformation. They promote stigma and tell lies about abortion. Most commonly, you've probably heard some of these. It includes that abortion causes breast cancer, uh, which it does not. It includes the idea that you can reverse something they call abortion reversal, medication abortion reversal, which it is a protocol involving taking progesterone after taking the first abortion pill, mifepristone, which was before the Supreme Court today. Um, they promote a protocol that has been called out by every legitimate medical organization as not a safe protocol or effective. Um, they also tell people that you're at higher risk of suicide, mental health problems, and that it could cause infertility in the future. None of these things are true. They have all been debunked by lots of research, but those things have a way of sticking, right? It's very easy to tell a lie. It's very hard to untell it. Um, and the other piece is emotional manipulation. Um, I have an experience of going into one of these centers when I was 20 years old. I was supporting someone in my family who had an unexpected pregnancy and was trying to make a decision. I thought I made an appointment at a clinic where she could get counseling about her options and that it was a supportive thing to do. I went with her to the appointment. This was a CareNet in New Hampshire at the time. And immediately things didn't feel right. But then we started being handed lots of literature that was very religious in tone and in imagery. There was religious imagery all over the walls. I thought it was really strange. We were given an ultrasound. She was given an ultrasound, and then the person who did the ultrasound came back with a printout that she had placed into a baby book. And on that printout was a speech bubble attached to the picture of her pregnancy that said, "Hi, mommy." So that's the level of like manipulation that these people are willing to go to. At that point, I tried to get us out, and someone at that CareNet actually physically blocked us from leaving for several minutes, and it was a very tense, strange interaction. And what I can say is that that interaction was deeply traumatic for the person in my family that I was trying to support and help. Um, Even years after that pregnancy. So there are so many ways that they're trying to deceive and coerce people. They will talk about any option except abortion. They will not tell anything truthful about it. So I wanted to talk really quickly about one of their most powerful tools of emotional manipulation, honestly, is ultrasounds. So Nifla, that organization I mentioned before, they actually started the use of ultrasounds in anti-abortion centers in the 90s. And the reason they did it, this picture here that you see, ultrasound impact opening a window into the womb, that's their language. That's from their website. They really believed that, and they will quote the statistic that 80% of what they call abortion-minded women, when they see an ultrasound image of their pregnancy, will choose not to have an abortion. That led to an enormous movement of getting people trained in what's called limited obstetric ultrasound, um, so that people without a lot of or any real medical training could perform these very basic ultrasounds. Um, Nifla now runs a nationwide training program for staff and volunteers to learn how to do limited obstetric ultrasound. What do I mean by that? A limited obstetric ultrasound is not diagnostic. It cannot tell someone if their pregnancy is healthy. It cannot diagnose anything. It is just that. It is very limited. And in fact, many of these folks are trained to do an ultrasound early in pregnancy, um, on the belly, an outer ultrasound, when in fact, early in pregnancy, it's recommended that there's a transvaginal ultrasound because it's really quite small in early pregnancy. So that's not even best practice for ultrasound. And the other piece that Nifla is doing, they are now working to fully convert anti-abortion centers into actual medical clinics. And this is pretty scary. Um, right now, these places manage to provide just enough service, free pregnancy tests and these limited ultrasounds that they can scrape by under the radar, not being regulated and licensed like abortion clinics or any other healthcare facility. But now they're actually trying to convert them into full medical clinics. Um, and so the important thing to know is that it is intentional to manipulate people who go into anti-abortion centers through the use of ultrasounds. They know that people who come there are experiencing some level of anxiety or vulnerability. Um, and so they are preying upon that by using this tool, and by having this sort of pseudo medical veneer on what is really a very conservative Christian religious um, belief system about abortion, uh, that they have managed to build into sort of like an empire of these places across the country. So the bottom line about these places is that they do not respect individual autonomy. They use coercive practices. When someone walks into an actual clinic that provides abortion care, there are really strong guidelines about the type of options counseling that is done there. No one at an abortion clinic is interested in providing abortions to people who do not want them, have not chosen that of their own volition, right? In fact, there's really careful steps and questions that are asked in pregnancy decision counseling to make sure that that person is not being coerced into having an abortion. Um, Anti-abortion centers are very clear. Their entire agenda is not just for that individual to not have an abortion. Nifla talks about making abortion unthinkable. So they very clearly have an agenda for other people's pregnancies. And we're not big fans of that in the reproductive rights world. They completely disregard science, best practices, and patient privacy. Many of them will say that they are HIPAA compliant. There is no regulation. They do not have to use HIPAA because they're not regulated like a health center. And so whatever they say they are doing to protect privacy, there's no way to actually be certain of that at all. Um, they spread disinformation about abortion. If we, think about the times that we are in are so confusing for people who may be seeking abortion care or options counseling. Since Dobbs, it's really a lot of chaos in a lot of places in this country. And the most vulnerable people are usually the furthest from accurate information. They have more barriers to go through before they get that accurate information. And these centers know that. And they are preying upon the confusion in the post-ops moment. And they're also receiving more money from states and federal programs, which I'll talk about in a second. Um, but they are also setting up new centers. They are growing. They are growing in number. Their agenda is bigger and bolder than ever. They are more dangerous than ever. Um, they also delay care and eliminate options. So, at GER, we worked with We Testify and an abortion storytelling program. And one of their storytellers who helped train our elder abortion storytellers was someone who, as a young person, went to what turned out to be a crisis pregnancy center, and through them constantly saying that the ultrasound wasn't done properly and she had to come back in, she ended up having to have an abortion much later in pregnancy than she would have originally. Um, and that increased the cost of that procedure significantly, often by thousands of dollars. Um, but it also increases the emotional distress. When someone decides that they no longer can be pregnant, for many people, every moment after that, that they have to remain pregnant is really difficult. And so, what we fight for at GER is that people can get abortion care and frankly, any pregnancy related care when they decide they need it in the communities they live in. And that care is respectful and affordable. That is our goal. Uh, so we consider these centers completely predatory. We believe and there's research that shows they have presented public health risks. Um, there was a story people may have seen in The Guardian maybe a year and a half ago now, about an anti-abortion activist who had been a nurse and decided to volunteer at an anti-abortion center. And she saw that they were using expired cleaning products. They were improperly sanitizing instruments that were going into people's bodies. There was the potential to spread disease and infection. And she actually became a whistleblower. And she is someone who we do not share the ideological views about abortion, but she saw as a medical professional something was wrong and people were being set up to be harmed. And so she said something about it. And if we just get that little glimpse in, we can imagine there's so much more we are not seeing. One of the things I want to talk about that's really important, and I know people are coming here from all over, There are many places in this country where tax dollars are actually being used to fund not just crisis pregnancy centers, but also programs that are sometimes called alternatives to abortion or abortion alternatives. And all of these programs are designed to dissuade people from having abortions, right? And to either parent or place children for adoption. Um, those states have, there are, I think it's now 16 states in the country where taxpayer dollars are being funneled into these programs. Before Dobbs, it was somewhere around 110 million. Now, after Dobbs, in the end of last year, $250 million in taxpayer money were being dedicated across 16 different states to support these type of programs. Um, that's wild, and we should all be infuriated about that. One of the pieces that infuriates me the most is that some monies from the TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, right? Like a uh, this is a social safety net program for low income families with children to get back up on their feet. It's usually a cash assistance program, which is quite rare for people who depend on social service and safety net programs. It's quite rare to have a cash benefit. It helps people keep their cars, keep their jobs while they're trying to get into a better and more stable place in life. Um, TANF monies in many states are being funneled into these programs. So what's happening is taxpayer dollars that are supposed to be dedicated to low income families and often families led by a single parent, that money is instead being given to these centers instead of directly to those families, um, to have agency and make choices about what is best for their future. This money is instead going to anti-abortion centers who are then spreading misinformation, junk science, and trying to guilt people into remaining pregnant and having children, whether that is what is best for their life or not. That sort of stuff really infuriates me. And now, the stakes are so much higher in this moment than they were even just a couple years ago in terms of pregnancy dating. So people who live in states that have a 6-week ban, an 8-week ban, or 12 weeks, 15 weeks, whatever these are, the information people need about how pregnant they are is so important. It's always important. But the stakes are so much higher when so many people in this country, millions of women in their reproductive years, live in states where they can probably not get abortion care at all and will have to travel. And the time it takes to get the money together, to get the travel together, to figure out what is someone going to do with their other children while they travel. We've seen folks in Maine come from Texas for an 8-week pregnancy. That is obscene. What people should not have to leave their communities. They should not also be lied to in their communities. Um, Particularly not lied to with all of our tax dollars, right? So, um, we at GER really, when we started this effort around anti-abortion centers, lots of people were asking us, why is this so important? And we really feel that this is where the real battle is on the ground for people who are at most risk and have the least resources when they are facing a pregnancy they maybe didn't plan for. Um, so I hope that we've agitated you a bit about these centers. Um, and I like to end with a little bit of good news, which is that there are actually radical models of real support for people. Um, it's really important to know that every clinic that performs abortions will do options counseling with someone if they need that. They will check in. They will refer out to adoption agencies, they'll refer out to prenatal care. That's the standard, but there are also these beautiful models of centers that are really trying to be true pregnancy resource centers. So trying to be what anti-abortion centers claim they are. One of those is All Options, and they're based in Indiana. Um, I'm a little biased because I've volunteered on their talk line for 5 years, but All Options is they house an abortion fund and a diaper bank and a pregnancy options counseling line that is free and confidential in the US and Canada. They run the Faith Aloud um, talk line also, which is interfaith clergy members who are there to talk with people and provide spiritual counseling as they're trying to make and live with whatever pregnancy outcomes they've experienced. Um, they're really amazing, and they truly mean we're here for you without judgment, with total compassion, no matter what option is the one you need to choose. Um, and Just Choice is another partner that we work with at GER. They are based out of Ohio, but they do work, some of their services are national. The amazing thing about them, they will nationally help refer anyone to abortion care and abortion funding. They're an adoption agency that is centered on making a plan that meets the needs of and honors the dignity of the person who is pregnant and who is going to be the first, first or birth parent of that child. They work to do adoption differently so that it is less traumatic all around, because there's a lot of trauma in the history of adoption in this country. Um, and the other beautiful thing they offer is a respite program for parents who really need a break, and are maybe at risk of having the child protective services intervene in their family. But instead, they train and vet volunteers who provide respite care for children while their parents get things together so they can show up as the best parents they can be. So we like to lift up these models at GER because this is the kind of future that we want for pregnant people in this country. We want wraparound supports. We want a total lack of judgment and stigma around any of the decisions that people have to make. Um, and I will say that if you are not already using this tool, if you need to know anything about real clinics that will provide real care, ineedana.com. This is an incredible resource, and it is updated constantly by really dedicated folks. So I recommend that, if to just be familiar about who is providing real care in your community. And if you remember at the beginning, the directory about the crisis pregnancy center map, who's providing this fake junk science kind of care in your community? Know the difference. It's one of, those easy, low barrier things you can do as an individual. To be a resource for people in your community is know the difference between who's providing real care and who's spreading stigma. Um, and the last thing I'll say is that these are pictures of folks in Bonnie's group. Bonnie's not in these pictures, but these are her pals. GER takes lots of different kinds of action against anti-abortion centers, including there is a weekly what they call a pop-up demonstration in Waterville, Maine, where there are just positive information about abortion, um, demonstrating outside of places that condemn or spread stigma about abortion, including their local crisis pregnancy centers. There are 2 of them in Waterville now, which is, just a small city in Maine. Uh, and we also have worked with a public health department of a city, of a municipality, to run an education and awareness campaign about crisis pregnancy centers. We have folks writing letters to the editor to educate people in their community through those means. Um, We do teach-ins like this with college students who then join us in demonstrations and in taking action. We are constantly proliferating new ways to confront these places. There are many attempts to legislate them out of existence. Those are really long haul efforts, and they've been really stymied by that Supreme Court case, Nifla v. Becerra. So we really believe that education is the most profound tool we have, that we, all of us, can become a resource of truthful information for the young people in our community who may be targeted by these places. And then they become a resource to their peers. And so that is the kind of change we're hoping to make. And we have tons of organizing resources and lots of support to offer anyone who wants to take this information and become active in their local community. If you have particular questions, please get in touch with me. We would love to GER with you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you,
Really
everybody. Have a great night.